Death, taxes, and Nintendo Switch games leaking early. This seems to be like the three commonplace occurrences, the three things that are guaranteed in life because, I mean, pretty much since the dawn of the Nintendo Switch, every major first-party title for this system gets leaked early. And of course, this is something that's always happened with leak culture, games leaking early, systems leaking early, but it impacts the Nintendo Switch in a bit of a different way. It's actually quite a sizable problem for Nintendo they have with leaking. And I'm not talking about YouTubers' basements leaking, which, I mean, one day karma's gonna bite me in the ass with that because I obviously film in a basement, but you know, until then, I'll keep making the joke about it because it makes me laugh. It makes me laugh, and that's what all these videos are really do, to entertain myself, and I hope they entertain other people. But this leaking problem is a sizable thing for Nintendo. Pretty much every major first-party Switch game that has come out within the past couple years gets leaked early. People get their hands on it, people do things with it, and then the game can be fully played. Now, it's a little bit different than in yesteryear. It's a little bit different than with other major platforms on the market. Back in the day, when things leaked early, the internet wasn't quite as big. Yeah, you got to be realistic about that. It was much harder to find things like ROMs and emulators, this, that, and the other, figure out how to make things work on your computer and stuff. It was definitely sort of in its infancy, but as time has gone on, obviously games have grown and have gotten bigger and better and badder to some degree, I guess. I guess you could sort of lean in on the badder portion of it. And of course, you have your major systems nowadays. You have your PlayStation 5, your Xbox Series X, and then your Nintendo Switch. Now, when it comes to games leaking early, how does it happen? How does this end up happening? Oh, by the way, we're talking about Splatoon 3 because that game leaked already, even though it's not coming out to the end of this week. But how do things like this happen? There's a couple different ways, honestly. There's things like review copies. Review copies get out there in the wild. People sometimes tend to rip them and then put them up online, post them up online, and then everyone can check them out. Now, what's interesting about that, though, is Nintendo is pretty strict on who gets a review copy when it comes to an early game for the Nintendo Switch. Like, there's a hierarchy of places there. They like to emphasize websites, even though a lot of websites don't get the traffic that a lot of YouTubers get, but you know, it is what it is. And Nintendo just goes about it in their own way. They've tracked who they give review copies to and stuff like that, put like secret code in there and stuff to try to thwart this, but it never really works. So is it really the people that are getting review copies early, or is it something more nefarious, such as getting a physical copy of the game early? Now, that does indeed happen. These games get out there in the wild, and you can play these games. That happened with me with Metroid Dread. I got an early copy of the game from a local mom and pop shop. I ended up playing it, and you know, I really enjoyed it. Gave it a good review, but Nintendo's legal team was not too happy with me about that, even though it's like, well, why are you going after me? I'm the small fry here. Why aren't you going after the big fish to fry? But I ain't snitching. I ain't dropping no names, so maybe you should go after me. But here's where the problem lies with Nintendo when their games leak early, because of the fact that somebody gets a copy of The Last of Us, which just came out on the PlayStation 5, and that copy is just pretty much going to be for them. No one else is going to have access to that copy. Maybe if a friend comes over, because you can't necessarily just rip that game, put it on an emulator on your PC, and then play it, because the PlayStation 5's architecture does not currently run on the PlayStation or on the PC. Same thing with something like the Xbox Series X. The Nintendo Switch, however, it's pretty damn easy to run an emulator for a Switch and play Switch games on it. Now, obviously, some games work better than others. It's all contingent on how powerful your PC is. But one time I did an experiment. I wanted to see if I, an idiot, could figure out how to run an emulator for the Nintendo Switch and play a game on it. And the results were kind of shocking to me, how well everything worked with this. And my PC, you know, it's not the best, it's not the worst, it's pretty much middle ground, but I was able to play a plethora of games, and it wasn't hard to do. It wasn't hard to set anything up. And I just thought to myself, well, damn, that's really easy. No wonder a lot of these early games that leak for the Nintendo Switch end up getting all leaked as far as information is concerned, as far as how the game is played is concerned, more so than just like a shaky camera pointing at your television because you got the one copy of The Last of Us Part 1 before anyone else did. Pretty much anyone has access to this stuff. Of course, there's the whole legal side of things, but that's a road for a different day. But it's interesting to me. And it's like, well, what can Nintendo actually do to sort of plug this leak? You know, you gotta plug it. I don't know that there is anything they can do. We could talk about the whole de novo situation with DRM technology, which is something that we talked about probably a week or so ago on the channel, and it's something that nobody really wants because there's ramifications when you have de novo DRM in your games. Your games don't run as well, which is a problem for the Switch. Let's be real, there's some games that don't run well already. Adding in more resources to sort of bog down the Switch's infrastructure are not a good idea. And de novo says, oh, it's not a problem, it's not gonna happen. It's like bullshit, okay? You look at PC games, and PC games have had this problem time and time again that have had DRM technology in it where they don't run as well. Of course, then you have the always online interconnectivity where you have to be online and the game will like check to make sure you're online while you're playing the game in the middle of it. It's not something like when you first boot up your Nintendo Switch and it's like checking to see if we could play this game if you have a secondary Nintendo Switch. It's completely different than that. You could simply just tether your cell phone to make it so that it connects to your Nintendo Switch and does like a Wi-Fi hotspot, and then you can boot up the game and then you're fine. You don't have to worry about it checking once again for an online connection. With something like DRM technology, you have to constantly check for things, and that's something that developers and publishers can add into these games to make it just not very user-friendly. And really, that is the worst idea that they can do, in my opinion. Because yes, there is a piracy problem on the Nintendo Switch, and there's a load of reasons for it, but punishing the people who aren't doing this, you know, punishing the whole group instead of punishing the individuals just doesn't make sense to me. It's like the worst route you could go down. You're punishing good people for a handful of bad apples. You know, maybe these people play the Nintendo Switch because a lot of times you don't need an online internet connection. You can just pop in a cartridge and do something like that. Maybe they live in a rural area. So what do you do with this? How do you stop it? How do you circumvent it? How do you stop this wave of piracy that's hitting the Nintendo Switch to the point of where people easily have access to the games themselves and the emulators and can set it up very easily? Like I said, I set it up and I'm a freaking moron. So what do you do to circumvent this? You can't outlaw emulators because emulators themselves aren't illegal. As much as some people would like to make you think they're illegal, they're not illegal. That's just the way it is. Making an emulator to play something and backing up your copies of the games is technically not illegal. But I think it comes down to the games themselves. I think it comes down to the way that the emulators read the games or how they do this, that, and the other. And I don't think there's an easy answer for this. De novo DRM is the worst answer out of this. That's what nobody actually wants. But what do you do when it becomes a problem and it becomes a widespread problem to where people are playing your game a week early before even reviewers are reviewing the game for you? These people already have it. I don't know that there is an answer. I really think the only way to do it, and it's going to sound archaic, and it probably wouldn't stop it, but I think it would quell it a bit. I think it would slow it down a little bit, is just to go after these websites that are hosting the ROMs, or go after the individual ROMs and do a DMCA claim on the ROMs. Be like, hey, this is my game, blah, blah, blah. I almost feel like Nintendo would need to set up a completely different division to do things like that. And then you get into the whole point where it's like, well, what if it's a game that's already released and you own that physical copy of the game? It's a very gray matter area. And Nintendo likes to view emulation a lot of times as a black and white situation where it's like, this is good or this is bad and you can't do this, you can't do that. But legally speaking, I think one day somebody's going to try to test Nintendo on that. You know, somebody with a lot of money or something like that could really see how deep Nintendo can go with this case. A lot of people are just afraid and Nintendo sues them. They end up in jail and stuff like that because they're charging for ROMs. The whole ROM and emulation side of things is very interesting on the Nintendo Switch. And because of the fact that, let's be real, it's not super taxing to run some of these games on the platform, it just makes it very easy to run them on your PC, and at times you could run it better on the PC than you can on the Nintendo Switch. And then you have the Steam Deck, which can also run Nintendo Switch games. Granted, some games run better than other, but it's very interesting to me, and I always like to watch what ends up happening and, you know, sort of the fallout from the situation, because I feel like it's the same thing every time. People complain like, oh, they got this game early, they're leaking it, they're ruining on Twitter, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, what are you going to do about it? Like, what can you actually do to circumvent this? So if you're like a developer or something like that, MVG, who went home to England to eat some tea and crumpets and please, sir, may I have some more? I would tell you to watch this video and give me some suggestions in the comment section down below, but you're on holiday, as they call it. They don't call it a vacation, they call it holiday. He's actually in Australia, where he's actually from. But yeah, I don't know. It's Labor Day. I just felt like talking about something, and so this is the video I came up with. Let me know in the comment section down below what you think of this. Do you think it's as big of a widespread problem as a lot of people are led to believe? Obviously, a lot of Nintendo Switch games still sell astronomically well, so it can't be that big of a thing, but it is an inconvenience. It is an annoyance, especially if you're not trying to get spoiled on a game or learn about something from a game before the game comes out, and you're avoiding reviews and stuff, and then, you know, Tony 2Bucks on Twitter just like leaks a major storyline that no one's supposed to know about because he's playing the game on his PC. And as always, guys, thank you for checking out this video. If you are new to the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button, like, comment, and share. Hit that bell notification as well. Avoid the skies, avoid the leaks, although really it's Splatoon 3. What could really leak from that? Unless it has an in-depth story mode that maybe has some surprises where octolings and inklings are abolished from the earth or something. I don't know where I'm going with that. And as always, I'll catch you guys on the next video.